She was originally the founder of the Southern style and sold a design for billions of dollars. But because of the safety button space, she came to 1973 and had her only relative in 2 lifetimes, An Xiangbei. But a hunting trip made her meet her pen palsNo, isn't it sibling style? How did you become a sweet pet? After returning from the mission, Chen Xun washed away the bloody smell all over his body. Water droplets dripped down his short hair and slid down his shoulders. An Yinan's eyes were slightly deep, and he envied the water droplets that slipped into his clothes. At this moment, Chen Xun slowly unbuttoned his shirt, and An Yinan saw the perfect ratio of his shoulder width and leg length, with incredibly smooth muscle lines. Man, her. Good looking. Chen Xun looked at his wife with a warm glint in his eyes. An Yinan quickly nodded and said, "It looks good." After the words came to his senses, he only had time to hear a muffled smile. Chen Xun stretched out his arm and pulled the embarrassed and angry girl into his arms, with a low, magnetic voice. "Just look. How can I get there?" Chapter 1. One Dream in 10 Years. You are listening at novel-full.audio. In the pitch-black room, the siblings hugged each other for warmth. The sound of the wind outside and the creaking sound of the wooden door made the two of them unable to close their eyes on this stormy night. The woman lying on the bed of Xiangbei suddenly opened her eyes and rubbed her eyebrows when she saw her surroundings clearly. "It's this dream again." An Yinan sighed, "A dream that lasts for 10 years. She, the founder of the ancient style south of An, sold a design for hundreds of millions of yuan, and a Chinese style swept the world, attracting a large number of foreign friends to experience Chinese culture. But she has a secret. She lives in 2 worlds every day, the real world during the day and the virtual world in her dreams, watching others grow. She is an orphan who was thrown at the entrance of the orphanage just a few months ago. Apart from her blanket, she only has a safety buckle with her. 10 years ago, she was cut off by a vase and her finger was stained with blood on the safety buckle. Since that day, she has had a safety buckle space, and the huge space seems to be out of reach. From the day she obtained space, as soon as she fell asleep, she dreamt of another girl, from the beginning of happiness to the recent desolation. Warning. The countdown to rebirth is 10 days. Warning. The countdown to rebirth is 10 days. Warning. The countdown to rebirth is 10 days. The warning has been reminded 3 times in a row. This is the 3rd time it has been reminded, with the first reminder lasting 30 days and the second reminder lasting 15 days. Rebirth. Will it really happen? She never touched novels before, but since she had space, she has read a lot of space genre novels. Is the end of science metaphysics? No one knows. The first reminder, she didn't pay any attention, but the second reminder made her heart ache together, as if she had already determined that this would happen. In 5 days, she purchased a large amount of goods online, but these were not enough. As soon as dawn broke, An drove south to the wholesale market and directly ordered various grain and oil seasonings. He used a 30% deposit of 170 million yuan to write down the delivery address for the boss. She went to the fruit wholesale market and seafood market again, buying and selling grain, oil, seasoning, sugar, milk powder, daily necessities, hygiene products, stationery, fruits, seafood, and important types of medicines should be crossed out one by one on the purchase order. An drove south to a deli restaurant. "Xiaowen is here, hurry up and see what you want to eat. Auntie will put it on for you." Auntie warmly greeted her. Her shop has been open for more than 20 years, and this little girl has been here for more than 20 years, watching as she grew up. "I want to order these cooked foods. Please help me find the delicious steamed buns mantu." An Yinan wrote the list in advance and handed it to the aunt. Auntie, looking at the quantity on top, "This at least starts at 5,000 pounds, Xiaowen, why are you buying so much? If you can't eat it, it will spoil." The aunt felt sorry for her and was worried. An Yinan smiled and said, I ordered it for someone else. Auntie, I need you to do it as soon as possible. Okay, Auntie will do it for you. Auntie smiled and naturally felt happy about this big business. An Yinan paid all the money for cooked food and manta buns, which is different from other places. When she was young, she didn't have money, so my aunt didn't give her less cooked food. She was grateful in her heart. When she grew up, she made money and didn't patronize my business less. Returning home exhausted, looking at the series of deduction records, my originally restless heart suddenly settled down. Online shopping items are being delivered one after another, and the delivery guy is sweating profusely from exhaustion. Sisterin, you have restocked again. The delivery guy moved all the items to the warehouse. Every month, An Yinan purchases various fabrics and materials to prepare for her design drawings, and the delivery guy has become accustomed to it. An Yinan nodded with a smile and handed the delivery man a bottle of water. I'm sorry to trouble you again, she said. The young man wiped his sweat and said, what's going on here? It's what I should do. Boxes of things filled the warehouse, leaving more than 10 boxes. And asked the young man to put them in the yard. Her yard is very remote, located in the eastern suburbs, leaning against Chunlai Mountain in the back. It takes 30 minutes to drive outside and see other houses. She likes quiet places and the humidity of the air here. She bought this piece of land and built this courtyard. As night fell, An looked south at his courtyard and said, can it be taken away? After thinking in her heart, she realized that the courtyard in front of her had disappeared. She immediately looked into her own space, and the courtyard was located in a corner of the space. Is this also possible? An Yinan released the courtyard again, still in its original position, and everything remained unchanged. Flashlights, mosquito and insect prevention, medicines, furniture, and the most important hygiene products. I contacted several fabric factories again and went straight to clear the warehouse. Those in charge were all a bit dumbfounded. This ancient style master must have innovated his design, but the demand is also too high. After receiving the goods, An Yinan was afraid of leaving something behind and went to sweep large supermarkets. On that day, all chain supermarkets in the entire city and surrounding cities had empty goods, causing a day of panic. In 5 days, all the purchased items have arrived and been transferred to the space. An Yinan even bought more than N power banks, fully charged, just in case. In the past 2 days, the system prompts have become more frequent. Warning. The countdown to rebirth is 3 days. Warning. The countdown to rebirth is 2 days. Warning. Rebirth countdown is 1 day. It was night, and she put all the courtyard into space. These days of crazy purchases have already used up 90% of her assets. If this space teases me, I'm afraid I'll have to work even harder to draw pictures in the future. A thunderbolt sounded in the sky, and An Yinan's head went dizzy and he lost consciousness. Sister, don't die. Sister, North is obedient, don't die. And Yinan heard the little boys crying one after another. She wanted to lift her hand and rub his head, but was powerless. Her arms couldn't be lifted, and her eyelids were heavy and she couldn't open them. Memories raced through her mind, familiar and unfamiliar. These memories all belonged to the girl with the same name, An. During the days when she was shopping day and night, and left south. And Xiangbei was injured by his uncle's Chen Xun, and he had a high fever that afternoon. However, his grandmother seemed to have not seen him before. And Xiangnam knelt in the yard and begged them for some food, but they remained indifferent. In order to make things better in the north, Xiao Yinan stole half of the black flour mantu in the kitchen. After being found, Chen Xun was killed by his grandmother. An Yinan sat up directly, her eyes suddenly widened, and the pain all over her was like a truck running over her, making her frown uncontrollably. Chapter 2. Martyrs and Orphans. You are listening at novel full.audio. Sister, you're awake, and cried to Peking University. An Yinan suddenly covered in Xiangbei's mouth and said, don't cry. And nodded to the north, and then An let go of her hand. If she woke up the old lady now, they might not be able to escape another beating. Now she can't muster any strength. An Yinan sorted out her memories, some of which she, as an observer, couldn't empathize with. The original owner has the same name as her and is 17 years old this year. Their father was a soldier who died in a border battle, and their mother was a female worker in a textile factory. After learning about her father's sacrifice, she entrusted them to her grandmother's family and promised to give the textile factory job to her aunt. After asking them to sign a letter of guarantee, she smiled and drank the poison, accompanying her father. But how could she have thought that her grandmother and her uncle's family had taken over their house, fighting against their children, and her siblings could only sleep in the firewood shed? I can only drink a little bad water every day to maintain my breath. There are 2 girls and 1 son in my uncle's family, and the 3 children either beat or scold them, or file a complaint for adults to beat them. Prefer boys over girls. Why is Xiangbei treated the same way? This kind of species is quite unusual. An sorted out everything and hugged Xiangbei in his arms. The 10-year-old boy was not as tall as someone else's 9-year-old child, and his whole body was even blue-green and purple. The old scars were not healed, but new ones came again. Xiangbei, I will take you to live a good life. 2 lifetimes, her only relative. Sister. Xiangbei was so strong that he didn't cry anymore. He just hugged his sister's neck and wanted to grow up quickly and protect her. The next day, with the sound of curses outside, An Yinan patted Xiangbei's face. Today, my sister will send you to Aunt Zhang's house, An Yinan whispered. Okay. An nodded north and did whatever his sister said. When it calms down outside, An will give An half a white flower mantu from the south to the north. Eat something first. And Xiangbei quickly shook his head and said, Sister, I don't eat, I'm not hungry. Sister, you eat. Last time, my sister took half a black mantu and was beaten, but her stomach growled when she just finished talking. An rubbed his head towards the north and said, You eat, this is not for them, sister has it too. He took the other half of mantu from his pocket and showed it to An Xiangbei. And Xiangbei picked a small one and ate it. A child who is sensible is heartbreaking. Since she has come here, she will definitely take care of her children and face north. After eating mantu, the sister and brother dragged An northward, climbed out of the dog hole behind the woodshed, and then went to Aunt Zhang's house. Uncle Zhang worked as a repairman in a textile factory, and his job was introduced by his mother. Aunt Zhang had been helping the siblings in the dark, otherwise they would have starved to death long ago. Coming from the south and heading north, hurry inside the house. Aunt Zhang pulled the 2 children and couldn't help but shed tears. The 2 children, who were originally pure and white, had only been polished into what shape in just 1 year. Why is that old lady so cruel? The married girl splashed water, but this job and house are both owned by her parents. Why is it so malicious? Auntie, I want to leave your house facing north for half a day. I'm afraid I'll get beaten again at home, An Yinan explained directly. Aunt Zhang wiped the corner of her eyes and said, Okay, stay at my aunt's house for as long as possible. Arrange into the north and touch the things in An's arms to the south, then go directly to the County Revolutionary Committee. This is not where the children came from, play elsewhere. The gatekeeper saw An Yinan and pointed outside. An Yinan smiled and said, Uncle, my father is a martyr. I'm here to find Uncle Chen Jianhua, who is my father's comrade in arms. In this era, when one hears of a martyr, the gatekeeper stands in awe. So, you can sit in my cabin for a while and I'll go ask you. An Yinan quickly nodded and said, Thank you, uncle. The gatekeeper quickly ran into the back house and lowered his head to say a few words to a young man. The young man looked at An Yinan in the gatehouse before nodding. About 2 minutes later, a tall figure ran out, followed by the young man who had just arrived. I'm Chen Jianhua, girl. Who is your father? Chen Jianhua's voice was a bit loud, and after many years in the military, his loud voice had long become a habit. An Yinan stood up and said, Uncle Chen, my father is in Qinghua. Chen Jianhua was stunned for a moment, his eyes turning red. Girl, your father is from Anqing Kingdom. Why? When did he happen? Martyr, following the procedure from above, he couldn't even reach the County Revolutionary Committee. He didn't hear any news. It's been over a year now. An Yinan's eyes also turned red. Chen Jianhua closed his eyes and thought of them fighting side by side. His life was saved by Ngu, but he didn't expect others to have already left. Uncle Chen, I came to ask you something today. An Yinan looked at Chen Jianhua's attitude and felt a little uneasy. If Chen Jianhua is not as described by her father, she will have to find another way, which will be a lot of trouble. Hey girl, talk to me. Chen Jianhua looked at the little girl with a clear expression in his eyes. It was this bony and emaciated appearance that made people feel particularly distressed. I have a lot to say, do you have time? An Yinan asked seriously, frowning. She couldn't explain these things clearly in a word or two, and she also wanted to let Uncle Chen know the whole story. Chen Jianhua nodded directly at the young man and said to An Yinan, come with Uncle Chen. And followed behind Chen Jianhua and walked for about 5 minutes before arriving at Chen Jianhua's office. Chen Jianhua poured a cup of hot water for An Yinan and asked her to sit on a stool. Speak slowly, it's not urgent, he said. An Yinan only talked about it now, from her father's bad news, to her mother entrusting her siblings to her grandmother, to her mother sacrificing herself for love, and then to her uncle's house where she took over her mother's job but took over their house, scolding and scolding them. She didn't even bring herself into an emotional state, but only told the story from a third-party perspective. Chen Jianhua suddenly stood up, his anger on his face unable to hide. How dare they? An Yinan pulled Chen Jianhua's sleeve and said, Uncle Chen, this is the guarantee responsibility letter that my mother asked them to sign at that time, and the conditions on it are all written very clearly. This is my father's martyr certificate. I also want to take my younger brother to the hospital for an injury examination, but I estimate we need your help to arrange it, otherwise we won't be able to obtain the certificate. Nowadays, hospitals are different from modern ones. Without any major issues, doctors simply give a few instructions to complete the task, and there is no paper proof at all. That's also why she didn't take An North to the hospital first. Okay, Uncle Chen will arrange. Chen Jianhua nodded. An Yinan smiled and said, Uncle Chen, there's one more thing I'd like to trouble you with. I want to take him north to the countryside, but I need to establish a relationship. Otherwise, since he's not old enough to go north, I can't leave him alone in the city. Chapter 3. Construction of Rural Areas. You are listening at novel-full.audio. Your mother has a job, Uncle Chen arranged for you to take over, so you don't have to go to the countryside. Chen Jianhua did not agree this time. Anqing saved his life, and even if he had to take care of these 2 children, he was willing. Although going to the countryside sounds good, it's just that he can't afford to raise them in the city. Let the children go to the countryside to work. Uncle Chen, I want to contribute to rural development. Besides, my house is there, and there are too many young and envious people heading north. We have had enough of these disputes and grievances. I want to take him away from here, and I don't want him to leave a shadow at a young age. An Yinan thought for a long time last night that if she wanted to take out her supplies, she would have to go to a place where no one knew them, otherwise anything that appeared out of thin air would be a problem in the future. Have you made a decision? Chen Jianhua pondered for a while before asking Xiang and Nan. Since contact, he has known that this little girl has an idea. Everything done is well-founded, and most children wouldn't think of these pieces of evidence. It's decided, An Yinan nodded and thought for a moment before saying again. If you can choose a place to go to the countryside, it's best to go to the north. Although it is cold in the north, only one crop of grain is harvested. The resources in her space are enough for her siblings to eat and drink spicy food, so there is no need to suffer that kind of pain. Chen Jianhua rubbed his painful forehead and said, "You make me think again." The next day, Chen Jianhua took his siblings to the hospital for an injury examination. An was a girl to the south, accompanied by Chen Jianhua's wife, while An was taken north by Chen Jianhua. After the four people gathered together, Chen Jianhua's daughter.In.Law wiped away her tears and said, "Even animals have emotions. There is not a good place on this child, with light shades of blue, purple, as well as some scalded blisters and scars." Chen Jianhua's face was also gloomy. Although he was angry yesterday, at most it was because his child couldn't eat, and everyone's child was beaten. He didn't think much about it, but he didn't expect that looking at the thin and weak child, with injuries all over his body, the chill in his eyes couldn't be concealed. They are the orphans of martyrs. Their father sacrificed himself to protect the country, but their child was bullied by those despicable people. How can the heroic soul rest in peace? With all the medical records ready, Chen Jianhua and his wife returned home with their two children and said, "You stay here today, I'll take care of the rest." An Yinan quickly stood up and said, "Uncle Chen, my father's martyr process did not go through the County Revolutionary Committee at that time. I want to send the information to my father's military district." Chen Jianhua pondered for a moment, nodded, and acknowledged the matter. "I will arrange this area first, and then have someone send the information over. Have you decided on your trip to the countryside?" Upon hearing this, An immediately looked up and nervously tightened his grip south of An. An patted An's head towards the north and said, "It's decided. I will definitely get the house back for you. How are you planning to arrange it?" Chen Jianhua learned about the injuries on his two children today and also understood An Yinan's determination to leave. He is probably disappointed with this place. "Can you please ask Uncle Chen to help me rent it out? I'm afraid it will be taken up over time, so why not rent it out? It will also make our lives easier." An Yinan had already thought of it. Although the house has been occupied, it is still under the name of An, which was arranged by my mother in advance. Others can live in it, but they cannot own it. Do you have to go to the countryside? I don't have a daughter at home, so I want to recognize you as my daughter, okay? You don't have to go to the countryside. If you don't want to go to the textile factory, it's okay. I can also get a job there. Aunt Chen looked at An Yinan with tenderness. She has twins and gave birth to two stinky kids. Now both of them have gone to the military, and there is no one at home to accompany her. Her daughter is so nice, with a thoughtful little cotton jacket. Goddess. An Yinan blinked her eyes and fully grasped the essence of being cute. The original owner had already big eyes, but now he is thin and his eyes are even bigger. Ah! Chen Jianhua's wife quickly responded, her eyes completely unable to conceal her joy. Goddess, when we go to the countryside, there is also my intention to build a rural area. Besides, my grandmother's family is not honest, so we can be considered to be hiding from each other. An Yinan held Aunt Chen's hand. We will come back in a few years. Don't ask An Yinan why she is so certain, after all, she knows about the college entrance examination in 1977. Aunt Chen was coaxed to the point where she couldn't help but wipe away her tears before finally responding. There are people above who are easy to handle, and the notice to go to the countryside comes quickly. At the same time, Uncle Chen also brought good news. The Public Security Bureau is going to arrest people this afternoon. Do you want to go and take a look? In Chen Jianhua's heart, what An Yinan did was no longer a child, and he could seek her opinions equally. We must go. An Yinan smiled, how could we miss such a great show? Besides, this is just the beginning, isn't it? Now her foundation is weak, and she can only rely on the army and Uncle Chen. In the future, when her wings are full, it will be the starting point for her family's true happiness. I knew this girl would join in the fun, Chen Jianhua and his wife laughed. Aunt Chen hesitated a bit and finally sighed, go see how those unscrupulous things get punished. In the afternoon, the police car stopped at the entrance of An Yinan's house. 5 police cars blocked the entrance tightly, and the police chief got off the first car. At this moment, his legs were still a bit weak. He received a phone call this morning, saying that if this matter is not handled properly, his black hat may not be able to be saved. Kick the door open. The director of the Public Security Bureau waved his hand, and the person behind him kicked up. The door was kicked open, and then he rushed in. Oh my, which heartless coward broke through the door in broad daylight? Is there any way? The old lady heard a bang sound before waking up from her nap, got up immediately, cursed, and walked out. My uncle and his family also walked out in a huff. It was obvious that they were all sleeping at noon. What's wrong with Mrs. Chen's family? So many police cars. Under the poplar tree, the aunties who were fanning stood up and looked over there. That unscrupulous family will have to die sooner or later. At this moment, Chen Jianhua walked forward with An Yinan. When Chen Pozi saw An Yinan, she immediately rushed forward, and Chen Jianhua blocked the way. You're a loser, just like your mother. You brought all the trouble to my house. We don't have you as a troublemaker in our house. The little bitch doesn't live here. If you want to catch her, you can beat her. This is my home, and it has nothing to do with this loser. Police officer, take this little bitch away and shoot her. Dirty words seemed irresponsible and rushed out. Chen Jianhua's face was pitch black like ink, and he didn't know that these 2 children listened to these vulgar words every day. The director of the Public Security Bureau is also speechless. What kind of top-notch old lady is this? Wang Hohot, right? Mrs. Chen was stunned for a moment and nodded. That's not a mistake. Seize it, and the other Chen family members are also arrested. The police chief waved his hand, and the people behind him immediately arrested the Chen family in the yard. Chapter 4. Mother's Background. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. Mrs. Chen shouted loudly, the police have bullied people. The old woman who bullied me is not reliable. My son.in.law is a martyr, and my daughter died with her. You police have also bullied my martyr's family. Oh my goodness, take a look, these people must die easily. The director of the Public Security Bureau had a dark face and was about to take action. And walked south and slapped it. The crisp sound echoed throughout the yard, as if time was still, calming everyone's movements. Martyrs' families. Do you also deserve it? My mother is not even your Chen family. What do you consider a martyr's family? An Yinan's words made Chen Lealazi, who had just realized, pause for a moment. Her eyes dodged for a moment and she let out a cry, Chen Fang, you slut. Look at the little slut you raised. Beat your own mother, you must die hard. Even if you die, you will go to 18 layers of hell. Looking at Mrs. Chen's expression, An Yinan knew that she had guessed right. Even though they prioritize boys over girls, Chen Zhaodi and Chen Pundi are still girls, but they can bully in Xiangbei at will, and the family's work is only for her and Bei to do, and the delicious food is not their turn at all. This is very wrong. She boldly exploded, but didn't expect it to be true. My mother is not a daughter of the Chen family. She will retaliate and have no burden anymore. Cry louder, as long as you cry, as many times as you cry, I'll make your grandson cry as long as you cry, as many times as you cry. An Yinan's voice was very low, whispering softly in Chen's ear, with a gentle smile on her face. Chen Pozi's triangular eyes widened and she said, little slut, dare you? An Yinan chuckled, slapped and slapped again. If your mouth is not clean, you can wash it with blood. The people in the yard were all watching, and the people outside the wall were all shocked and opened their eyes wide. The daughter of the An family seemed to be possessed by a demon, and the corners of Chen's mouth were bleeding. They even saw that she had spit out a tooth, which required a lot of strength. An Xiangnam, however, seemed to have nothing to do and walked up to Chen Jingui's side. Chen Jingui and An Xiangnam were as big as they were to the north, but they were fat-headed and had big ears. The food for An's family was fed into the mouth of this little beast, while Xiaobei only got beaten and worked every day. It's hard to think about it. This little face is really white. Chen Jingui burst into tears as he finished speaking. Animal, a wild breed that nobody wants. If you dare to hit me, I'll let my milk kill you. Chen Jingui cried, but his words didn't stop. An Yinan seemed to have missed it, just smiling at old lady Chen. An Yinan, if you let Jingui go, hit me if you want to. Aunt hasn't hit you, has she? Her good aunt cried and looked pitifully at An Yinan, as if she had suffered a lot of injustice. It seems like you haven't really fought before. Didn't you let Chen Egg fight? Didn't you let old lady Chen fight? Didn't you let your two daughters fight? You didn't do it, but you didn't let others do it too much. An Yinan smiled and didn't care much. With just one punch, it hit Chen Jingui directly in the stomach. Chen Jingui's already fair face immediately turned red and his crying stopped. Don't you say it yet. I don't seem to want to know too much. An Yinan looked at her uncle and grandmother with a smile on her face. She guessed with Chen Jianhua in the car and also mentioned what she wanted to do, but Chen Jianhua agreed. The director of the Public Security Bureau also greeted and exerted pressure from above. Everyone seems to be unable to see it. Let An Yinan play. My fist itches. An Yinan kicked out, and the police officers who were pressing against Chen Jingui were kicked away together. It was quiet, and An Yinan touched her nose. What, she didn't mean to do it. She didn't control her strength well, believe it or not. Chen Jingui landed with a thud, and the police officer took several steps back before standing firm, his face slightly flushed. He wants to say that this girl is a Hercules, really not his weak chicken, do you believe it? I say. Chen Egg gritted his teeth, his face pitch black, and he looked south at An as if he was looking at an enemy. An Yinan did not respond and pulled up Chen Jingui, patting his head. Chen Jingui looked like a bloody person at this moment. She doesn't care what others think of her, is she cruel? Isn't the original owner An Bei living a miserable life? How many people are reaching out to help? Do not advise others to be kind without suffering from others. Don't hit me, I'll say everything. Chen Jin closed his eyes. Chen Fong was picked up by my father when he was around 8 years old, but he couldn't remember the past. My father picked her up and gave her to me as my wife. Chen Jin kept her eyes closed, as if recalling the scene in her mind. When Chen Fong picked up her home, her forehead was covered in blood, her small face was round, white and tender, like a doll in a New Year painting. It looked so beautiful. Her father told him that this was his daughter.In.Law. He has been very kind to Chen Fong since he was young. He gives her candy behind her back, and her parents ask her to do laundry and work. He also secretly helps. Chen Fong always sweetly calls him brother. But 10 years have passed, and a man has appeared, on Qing Kingdom. He stole his own treasure and his wife. He sharpened his knife in the middle of the night and wanted to kill him. It was his mother who blocked him, because Anqing gave his mother 300 yuan to buy Chen Fong. He hated An Qingguo, his mother and Chen Fong, and they all blamed him. An Yinan was not surprised. After listening to this story, she didn't even fluctuate. Her mother Chen Fong's background was a comfort to her original body, who had always thought she was a girl. That's how old lady Chen treated her. An Yinan pulled up Chen Jingui and walked up to Chen Laotai's side. Where's the pink bamboo festival? In my mother's memory, there was always a pink bamboo joint with a transparent color. I had to go through it many times with Mrs. Chen, but she didn't give it. She complained to An's father and was overheard by the original owner. With the Chen family's background, it is impossible to give her mother a pink bamboo knot. Perhaps it is related to her mother's background. She does not want to decipher her mother's background, she just does not want her mother's belongings to be in the Chen family. How do you know? Chen Fong told you that. Old Lady Chen blushed and looked at her son with hatred, as well as Chen Jingui, who had fainted halfway through. She gritted her teeth and said, "It's in the second box in my room." An Yinan threw Chen Jingui to Chen Jianhua and said, "Uncle Chen, help me keep an eye on him." "Don't worry," Chen Jianhua picked up Chen Jingui's back neck, as if holding on to Mrs. Chen's neck. An Yinan walked into Mrs. Chen's house and found the box, a pink bamboo joint, in a cloth bag, with over 100 yuan on the side. She collected it all into the space. "What else does my mother have in your hands?" An Yinan faced old lady Chen directly. "It's gone." An Yinan smiled rather than smiled, pointing to Chen Jingui's small face bag. Chen Jingui snorted in pain. "It's really gone. Your mother came to the Chen family, only wearing blood-stained clothes and the pink bamboo joints on her wrist." "There's nothing left," Mrs. Chen cried. Chen Jingui is her lifeline and the incense of the old Chen family. An Yinan saw that she didn't seem to be cheating and clapped her hands. "I won't disturb the police officers in handling the case," he said. Chapter 5. Special Train for Educated Youth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fierce. The voices of everyone present. Chen's family has been taken away. The day of going to the countryside has also arrived. Aunt Chen has been preparing things for the siblings these days and asking someone to find tickets. By the way, Aunt Chen followed Chen Jianhua's name, her original surname is Sun, and her name is Sun Chenhua. Goddess, I have money. An Yinan took advantage of these days to withdraw all the money from the family. The current savings are quite troublesome, and they have to withdraw wherever they save. They have been going to the countryside for several years, so it's best to withdraw it in advance. Besides, you have space yourself, no one wants to take it away. You can take your money by yourself, the godmother gives you a different one, you must keep it. Sun Chenhua put 5 big unity cards and a bundle of tickets into an Yinan's hand, tiger-faced, but didn't let her return them. An Yinan's heart is warm. These siblings have suffered too much, and in the past year, there has been a small amount of warmth. Okay, I'll keep what the godmother gave me, and I'll take care of her in the future, and Yinan smiled and made a decision in her heart. Sun Chenhua smiled when she accepted it. Okay, let my daughter take care of me. Chen Jianhua returned and told An Yinan that the work in the textile factory had been vacated. He asked An Yinan how to arrange it. Do you have anyone who needs a job on my end? Just sell it for a cheaper price, An Yinan smiled. If the godmother wants to give her work, then she doesn't mind supporting her relatives. You girl, Chen Jianhua didn't expect An Yinan to say such a thing, but his heart was even more secure. The next day, An Yinan and his younger brother boarded the train to the countryside. Sun Chuanhua's eyes turned red with tears. Over the past 5 or 6 days, she has been spending more time with An Yinan and has also developed feelings. From initially wanting to repay kindness, to truly treating their siblings like their own children. Write me a letter when you arrive over there, and when you run out of money, just say, I'll give you money from home, don't save money. Sun Chenhua leaned over the train window, admonishing her one by one. An Yinan sat in his seat, nodding his head, his eyes red, choking up and unable to say a word. I'll come back when I have a vacation, and my family is waiting for you. Chen Jianhua patted his wife's shoulder to calm her down, which also made the child uncomfortable. An Yinan nodded, Goddess, you need to take good care of your body. Nothing is as important as your health. The train eventually left, and this carriage was for educated youth. Everyone looked at each other but didn't speak. After leaving the relationship, she had already established a process with an eBay, and there were only 2 tickets available. Naturally, the team going to the countryside would also accept the 2 people. As the sky gradually darkened, An turned north and covered her belly, but remained silent. An looked out the window at the black shadow and thought about the road ahead. Upon hearing the growling of her stomach, she turned around and pursed a smile. If you're hungry in the future, tell your sister you don't have to endure it. Rubbed An's hair towards the north, it was very soft. And Xiangbei remained silent for a moment and nodded. These days, he has been like heaven, the days when his parents were alive before. In the future, he will take care of his sister and let her live a good life. The little one secretly swears in his heart. An Yinan put his hand into the small bag. It was a Xiaobing, baked cake in griddle, prepared by Ganyang. It was as big as 2 slaps. Eat first. He broke half of the Xiaobing, baked cake in griddle, and handed it to An Xiangbei. He put the other half in his bag again, and An looked north and said, "Sister, eat." An Yinan nodded on his forehead and said, "We won't be hungry in the future." "Sister, if we're hungry, we'll eat." An thought northward for a while, and then slowly bit the Xiaobing, baked cake in griddle, on his hand. "I don't have a lot of money now, my parents have over 2,000 yuan in savings, my father's pension is over 1,000 yuan, and there is also 800 yuan stolen from the Chen family, which is over 4,000 yuan. Moreover, there are billions of supplies in their own space, and none of them will make them hungry. Are you also going to the countryside?" The round-faced girl across from them looked at them. After half a day, she had already become curious. An Yinan nodded and pointed to the red cloth above, the educated youth special train. The round-faced girl covered her face, but she forgot. "Please have big white rabbit milk candy." The round-faced little girl blushed and handed the candy to her siblings. Then, seeing a man and a woman beside her, she took out 2 more pieces and handed them over. An Yinan looked at the shy face of the little girl. "It's really surprising in this era." "Thank you." She took the big white rabbit milk candy and handed it to An Xiangbei, then stuffed another piece into her mouth. The sweet milk flavor filled her taste buds, which seemed to be stronger than what she had bought. Her space has several thousand pounds of big white rabbit milk candy, which doesn't feel as good as it does now. "You're welcome, you're welcome." The little girl was a bit shy, and after a few words, her face turned red. The round-faced girl's name is Xiangyuan, which matches her facial shape very well. The man next to him grabbed a handful of stir-fried melon seeds from his military green coat pocket and placed them on the table. "Don't mind, I didn't bring anything else, only melon seeds." Zhang Qian felt a bit embarrassed, but his melon seeds seemed to be taking advantage of others. No one else did anything, instead the girl next to Zhang Qian grabbed her first. An Yinan raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything. "Take out 4 dried sweet potatoes and 4 chocolate candies from the small cloth pocket." "I didn't bring anything either." "Don't mind the dried sweet potatoes at home." An Yinan first handed Xiangyuan dried sweet potatoes and chocolate candy. Then he took out another one and handed it to Zhang Qian. The girl next to Zhang Qian reached out her hand and waited. Unexpectedly, she handed the 3rd portion directly to An Xiangbei. Sun Xiaoqin pursed her lips and said, "You should give it to me first, and then to your younger brother." "Forget it, I don't care. Give it to me quickly." An Yinan was stunned for a moment. He had seen someone shameless before, he had never seen someone so shameless before. "Just as if I didn't hear her, I put the chocolate candy directly into my mouth." You're such a person, we're educated youth who went to the countryside together. How could we be so stingy?" Sun Xiaoqin's eyes widened, with an incredulous expression on her face. Before, when she said that, others would quickly give it to her. Why did the girl across from here eat it on her own? There won't be any trouble at all. An Yinan squinted his eyes, the chocolate remained so sincere, and even his mood improved a lot. Am I your mother? She squinted and looked at Sun Xiaoqin. Sun Xiaoqin shook her head and looked angry. So. Why do I give you my things? With your thick skin? With your shamelessness? Or with your soft food and hard food? An Yinan didn't get used to her. In her past life in an orphanage, she learned a lesson that bullying the weak and being afraid of the hard are the nature of some people. If I give her face today, then tomorrow she dares to give face without shame. You. Sun Xiaoqin's face turned red. If you don't eat it, then don't eat it. Who wants to eat something worthless? An Yinan rolled his eyes without any elegance. Xia Yuanyuan squinted her eyes, feeling intoxicated by the taste, rich and mellow, with infinite aftertaste. Chapter 6. Am I your mom? You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. Zhang Qian thought it was fruit candy, but the taste on the palate is chocolate. This is too valuable. The item had already entered his mouth and he didn't want to return it, but he also knew that the little girl across from him was not someone who took advantage of others. Chocolate is scarce and only available in overseas Chinese stores now. He has only tasted it once and the taste is not as good as this one. Xia Yuanyuan carefully finished his meal before asking Zhang Qian, I haven't eaten it before. Do you know what it is? Zhang Qian nodded and said, this is chocolate, only overseas Chinese shops can buy it. My already round little face turned even redder at this moment, and I immediately flipped over my pocket. I still have a big white rabbit here, do you want to eat it? An Yinan smiled and said, don't look for it. If you want to eat, I'll ask you for it. The little girl quickly nodded. At this moment, an disharmonious voice rang out. Is there a big white rabbit? Give me a piece. Sun Xiaoqin held back and forth, but still couldn't resist. Xia Yuanyuan is not stupid either. At the beginning, she only asked silly questions and felt shy when giving candy. However, this person has made great progress. Am I your mother? The little girl's crisp voice, her eyes fixed on Sun Xiaoqin. What was the rest of the conversation? Sun Xiaoqin had already listened to it once and thought it was easy to deceive, so why didn't she get on the stage? Humph, you look like a capitalist lady. Sun Xiaoqin snorted coldly, with one hand on her waist. An Yinan immediately stood up and gave a loud slap, calling out to Sun Xiaoqin's face. I built the countryside with my young brother, but because I didn't give you food, you sprayed feces everywhere and slandered others casually. Who gave you your face? You, I fought with you. Sun Xiaoqin was stunned and her head was still dizzy. Zhang Qian was sitting between Xia Yuanyuan and Sun Xiaoqin, and immediately stood up to block Sun Xiaoqin's outstretched hand. Xia Yuanyuan stood up and grabbed Sun Xiaoqin's hand directly. Why do you want to hit someone? It's not right to hit someone. We are all educated youth going to the countryside and we need to help each other. When An Yinan just took action, the little girl didn't realize what was going on. What's still unclear now? If the term capitalist style falls on them, then there won't be a good one. Not only will they be unlucky, but it will also affect their families. A malicious word is like destroying someone else. Just then, the train conductor walked over and said, What are you doing? What are you doing? You're going to get off and fight. What's going on at night? Just now, everyone watching the excitement dispersed, and Xia Yuanyuan sat back honestly and patted his face. That's right, it's so fierce and powerful. Don't fight anymore, I almost can't hold you back. An Yinan pursed the corners of her mouth, almost unable to suppress a smile. Just as Sun Xiaoqin reached out, and Xiangbei blocked in front of her sister, but was first blocked by Zhang Qian in the hallway. Later, Xia Yuanyuan stepped forward, bringing this matter to an end. An looked south at his younger brother and said, North, North, don't do this in the future. Sister is strong, she can't beat me. Since her birth, An Yinan has been a strong man, and even her father in the army is not as strong as her. But under the deliberate instructions of An's father and mother, no one noticed. In the future, when going to the countryside, there is no need to put away this strength. An looked north but stubbornly at her sister. I can protect her. An's eyes were hot, and in the end, he just rubbed his younger brother's hair and said, okay, protect your sister from the north. Because of the recent incident, Sun Shaoqin was transferred to a new position and replaced with a new young man. The young man remained honest and scratched his hair. I'm going to Quanshui village in Sanyang commune, and you guys? Xia Yuan immediately nodded and said, me too, my name is Xia Yuan. South, what about you? Xia Yuan immediately asked towards the south of An. She really likes the south of An. It would be great if they were in the same village. An Yinan's secret passage is really clever. That's right. An faced north naturally and An faced south together, and all four of them looked at Zhang Qian. Zhang Qian didn't speak, but nodded, his eyes casting a faint glance at An Yinan. Okay. Coincidentally, everything becomes a book. Now I just hope that Sun Shaoqin is not in the same place as them, otherwise it will be lively in the future. This time, the 5 people were very peaceful, without any troublemakers or takers. You can sleep for a while, Zhang Qian and I will check our luggage and never let you lose anything, the young man patted his chest and promised. It has been 3 days now, and everyone is very tired. At first, they talked and laughed, but the whole carriage was quiet in the back. An Yinan put the blanket on his lap and let him lie on it to the north. Go to sleep, sister. You can only replace sister when you're energized, right? Xiangbei has been staring at him these days, afraid of losing his luggage. In fact, all these luggage outside were hidden from the public, and valuable items were placed in the space by her. My sister called me later, and nodded north, feeling both sleepy and sleepy. Okay, go to sleep. An Yinan responded. Xia Yuan looked south at An's luggage and relaxed. I'll squint for a while, he said and nodded to the south and casually draped a coat over into the north. The next day, the sun was shining brightly, and An rubbed his eyes northward. Sister, you don't call me. The accusing gaze turned towards An Yinan. An Yinan smiled and said, I also fell asleep the night after. I just woke up not long ago. The night after, Xia Yuan woke up and asked An Yinan to squint for a while, and An Yinan then fell asleep. For Xia Yuan and Zhang Qian, after more than 3 days of contact, she can still trust them. The most important thing is that her big bag contains only bedding and a few clothes, and there is nothing valuable. Even if it is lost, she will just put in some effort. I took the train for 2 more days and finally arrived at the station. If it's convenient, the train can go directly to the county town, so there's no need to take a car to travel around. Outside the train station, a tractor is waiting, and 2 people are standing next to it. Is this going to Sanyang commune? Someone quickly walked over and asked. The leader nodded and said, put your luggage on first, wait a little longer. Once everyone is here, we'll leave. 5 people put their luggage away and sat on their own luggage without saying anything. After sitting on the train for 5 days, everyone felt wilted and lacked any energy. In no time, more than 10 people arrived. The people from the commune called their names, and when they were all there, they said to the people in front, let's go. Xia Yuan glanced at Sun Shaoqin, who had just boarded the car, and said, unfortunately, she is also from the Sanyang commune. And thought for a moment about their respective seats, and it's probably not as simple as being in a commune. Don't provoke us, just treat her as non-existent. An Yinan patted Xia Yuan and then put a piece of clothing on in Xiangbei. It's already September now, and at this time in northeast China, it's still a bit cold sooner or later. Moreover, I was still sitting on a tractor, and the wind kept blowing, making me shiver in the cold. Chapter 7. Quanshui Village. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Whether there are grudges or not, we can't even afford to cause trouble at this time. A tractor carrying more than 20 people arrived at the commune with a loud roar, and the leader divided the people into villages according to their names. In the list of educated youth, there is no name for Xiangbei, mainly because he is not old enough. However, Chen Jianhua has left the relationship, and there are also reasons why An Qinghua is a martyr. All aspects have been arranged, and the commune clearly knows and does not say much. The procedures for the 5 educated youth in Quanshui village have been completed, and the team leader can directly take them away. The commune staff who just picked them up registered their information and arranged for the village to pick them up. The captain is a person in his 50s who works in the fields all year round. His tanned face has some wrinkles, and with a rough wave of his hand, he says, "The people from Quanshui village have left with me." 5 educated youth, and Xiangbei is not included in the quota. Except for An Yinan, Yuan, Zhang Qian, and Qian Zhao, that candidate is not surprising at all, Sun Shaoqin. Yuan wanted to speak up and was pulled by An Yinan's sleeve. The ox cart slowly walked for about an hour before finally arriving at Quanshui village. Quanshui village is surrounded by mountains on all sides, and the only road is to bypass a mountain. The captain knocked on his cigarette bag before looking at the few people and saying, "Our Quanshui village is considered isolated from the world. Although the road out and in is not easy, in our Quanshui village, as long as we put in hard work, we won't go hungry. The mountains are high and the emperor is far away, and the road is difficult to walk, which corresponds to a shortage of children. And is very satisfied with this place. When cows climb the mountain slope, everyone gets off the ox cart and follows behind. In this era, the status of cows is higher than that of humans." Zhang Jiqing. The squad leader shouted as he walked outside a house. A male educated youth ran out quickly from inside, "Captain." The captain nodded and pointed to a few people, "This is the new educated youth. Please arrange everything and follow the old rules." As soon as he finished speaking, he remembered something and pointed to An Xiangbei, whispering a few words. That Zhang Jiqing nodded. "You've been sitting in a car for a long time, and just arrived, you also need to buy things. After resting for 3 days, you'll be grabbing it with the villagers." The captain held a cigarette bag in one hand and patted Zhang Jiqing's shoulder with the other before leaving. "My name is Zhang Jihe, and I am the captain of the Youth Institute. If you have anything to do, you can come to me first. Let's take a look now." Zhang Jihe stood aside and asked the few people carrying luggage to walk inside. This was originally a landlord's house, but when something happened, the house fell into disrepair for a long time. It was only after the educated youth went to the countryside that the old educated youth gradually began to repair it. Zhang Jihe walked and introduced the Educated Youth Institute. This is the entrance, and the left side has been opened up. It is a large dormitory for male educated youth. Those who want to save time can live in the large dormitory. On the right side, there are 5 small dormitories, all unlocked can be selected. Those who have a kong can live directly, while those who don't have a kong need to have the village people use a kong. 2 yuan can be used to arrange for convenience. As they spoke, they pointed out that most people live in large dormitories. Although the concealment is poor, it also saves them the need to buy things themselves. Later, the young man who moved his position on the train was called Qian Zhao. Without hesitation, he directly chose the large dormitory. He left from that house and it doesn't matter anymore. He will have to rely on himself in the future. "I live in the dormitory." Qian Zhao walked out of the queue carrying his luggage. "Then you can go directly to arrange your luggage. You need to find a carpenter to make the cabinet yourself," Zhang Jihe nodded. Living in a large dormitory is actually easier to manage. After speaking, he turned to Zhang Qian again. "Can I take a look at the small dormitory?" Zhang Qian asked. Zhang Jihe nodded and led a few people towards the small dormitory. These 2 rooms are occupied, while those 3 are empty, he said. Zhang Qian took a look and chose the innermost room, but this room does not have a Kong and needs to be rebuilt. Zhang Jihe didn't say anything. On the left side of the second entrance is the female educated youth dormitory, and the house opposite the female educated youth dormitory is the collective firewood house. On the right are 10 dormitories, but they are all empty. Let's see how to live. Zhang Jihe stood in the hallway, letting them choose for themselves. And chose a corner south of the house, which is very independent and not even adjacent to other rooms. There are aisles on both sides, but the back is blocked. I choose this one. An Yinan settled down. Xia Yuanyuan looked left and right, and each room was similar. She directly pointed to the one opposite to An. Their rooms only have one aisle. Zhang Jihe saw that both of them had settled down and looked towards the only one who had not chosen Sun Shaoqin. Sun Shaoqin wanted to choose an independent room, but she didn't have the money. Yuanyuan, you don't think anyone will take care of you, otherwise we'll have a room together. Sun Shaoqin calculated to herself, so she wouldn't have to spend any expenses and wouldn't have to live in the big dormitory. Xia Yuanyuan rolled his eyes and said, "Am I your mother?" Xian Zhao, who rushed over, burst out laughing, unable to resist. The few people on the train all knew the meaning of this sentence, so Zhang Jihe looked at their expressions but didn't say anything, clearly not wanting to care. No one is willing to live with you. Sun Shaoqin hummed and then pointed to An Xiangbei. He can't live in Erjin. It's inconvenient for us female educated youth to live here, and he's not a educated youth. Why live in the educated youth residence? Xia Yuanyuan was about to speak, but was blocked by An Yinan. Why? Because you look ugly. Because you want to be beautiful. Because you have a mouth that makes you sound loud. If you say no, then no. An Yinan's eyes were cold, and when Xia Yuanyuan saw it, he rubbed his arm, feeling that there was cold air in the air. Zhang Jiqing didn't even speak, the captain didn't speak, and the commune didn't speak. Who are you counting as? With every word spoken by An Yinan, he took a step forward. After finishing one sentence, he walked directly to Sun Shaoqin and grabbed her collar, lifting her straight up from the ground. What, do you still have any objections? Sun Shaoqin struggled to turn her head and looked at Zhang Jihe, but Zhang Jihe turned his head and looked elsewhere. She blushed and said, No. An Yinan smiled and placed her on the ground. She patted her wrinkled clothes with both hands, lowered her head slightly, and said in her ear, Be good, I don't like killing. Sun Shaoqin trembled, her whole face flushed, and a cold breath rose from her heels to the top of her head. Since you have chosen it, let's arrange it yourself. Zhang Jihe ignored these people and after arranging it, he returned to the front yard. Every time a new educated youth arrives, it causes a lot of trouble. He looks at them with a headache, and after all these years, he is too lazy to take care of them. As long as there is no big deal, he turns a blind eye. And looked south at the rooms of the 3 people, and it seemed that they all needed a heated Kong. Chapter 8. Heavenly Immortal Sister. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I need to go to the captain's house. The Kong needs to be heated and the roof needs to be repaired. Otherwise, if it's not repaired for a long time, I'm afraid I won't be able to survive the winter. There have been news reports before that it snowed heavily in northeast China, causing houses to collapse and killing many people. Zhang Qian nodded and said, Even for simple furniture, we need to make a few. An Yinan thought for a moment and realized that there were still quite a few things to buy. She would have to stay here for at least 3 or 4 years, and she didn't want to make do with it. I took out a piece of paper and a pencil from the big bag, thinking about what I needed, and wrote them down one after another. After going through his head for the last time and seemingly not missing anything, he handed the paper to Xia Yuanyuan. Xia Yuanyuan was surprised by the beauty of An Yinan's handwriting and also marveled at her meticulousness. Whether it was what she thought of or didn't think of, it was all written on paper. Xian Yuan handed the paper to Zhang Qian again, and Zhang Qian glanced at it and said, "It's very comprehensive. I also arranged it according to this. I'll go to the captain's house and ask," An Yinan nodded. She not only needs to buy things, but also needs to renovate the layout of the house. Although Bei is still young, she cannot live on the same con. The single room she chose is very dilapidated, but it is also the largest, and can be separated into 3 rooms. Although each room is not large, it is also a small double bed. I have my own room, one in the north, and a kitchen. This way, it's safe to eat and it's easy to take out the resources in the space. I'm looking at things here, and the things I've sent over count as part of me, Zhang Qian said quickly as he watched An Yinan take out a bag of brown sugar from a big bag, estimated to weigh about a pound. Xia Yuan also nodded. She hadn't thought about these things before, but she wasn't smart. Just follow smart people. And walked south from the Educated Youth Center and headed towards the direction of the village. The Educated Youth Camp is adjacent to 2 mountains, and it is possible that the former landlord may have moved away from the village in order to live in peace. "Child, can you tell me the way to the captain's house?" An Yinan saw a child and gave him a piece of fruit candy, and the child's eyes lit up. "Are you going to my house? I'll take you there." It turned out that this child was the grandson of the captain. An Yinan thought to himself, what a coincidence. The first person he met in the village was the grandson of the captain. On the way, I know the child's name is Huzi, and he is 8 years old this year. "Milk, there's a fairy sister looking for grandpa." Huzi shouted loudly as soon as he entered the yard, and then ran to the big water tank to scoop out cold water to drink. A woman came out of the house, her black hair mixed with silver, and her clothes were very formal. She first scolded the pie monkey a few times before looking into the yard. "Oh, you're really a fairy-like girl," the captain's wife slapped her thigh and quickly pulled An Yinan into the room. An felt a bit embarrassed to the south, but there was no hint of hesitation. "Auntie, I am from the south of An, a newly arrived educated youth. I have just arrived at our Quanshui village and I am not familiar with my hometown. I have to trouble you with some things." And took the brown sugar directly from the cloth bag and placed it on the table. The captain's wife looked at the brown sugar and her smile became even stronger. This brown sugar is a good thing, whether it's for personal reasons or for postpartum health, it's a nourishing thing. Whatever An Yiqing said, "Come to our Quanshui village and ask your aunt if you have any questions." An Yinan wrote a list and read what he needed. "We need 3 servings for everything, auntie, isn't it a bit difficult?" The captain's wife shook her hand and said, "It's not difficult. Besides farming, the people in our village have no other options. They can trade their skills for things, and their lives will be more comfortable. In this era, private buying and selling are not allowed, so it's just a name change. Just let everyone know what's going on. Do you need 4 of these water tanks? How big are they?" And compared the approximate height and width to the south, so she needs 2. Her home also has north, and water must be sufficient. "Cheng, this ant will be sent to you tonight. You come with me for the rest, I'll arrange it for you." The captain's wife stood up, looked at the brown sugar on the table, and still pushed it to An Yinan. "Take this brown sugar back, can you ask auntie for help? Auntie's heart is sweet, how can she ask for your things?" An Yinan suppressed the hand of the captain's wife, not knowing that this was a polite remark from the villagers. "Auntie, I don't know anyone in this village, so I'll have to trouble myself in the future. If things are returned, I won't dare to come knocking on my door anymore." The captain's wife finally breathed a sigh of relief and smiled, that aunt has the audacity to accept it. "Let's go and take you to place things." In the yard, An took 2 more big white rabbits and stuffed them into Huzi's hand. The boy smiled and said, "Thank you, Sister Tianxian." The captain's wife was delighted to see it and said, "This skinny monkey has a sweet mouth. Two people walked around the village and arranged everything they needed. There is a father and son couple sitting on the Kong, and everyone in the village calls him Xia, the second in the Xia family. The father and son of the Xia family also took on the task of repairing the roof. According to the aunt of the brigade leader's family, they all came to their village for leaking houses. When in return to the Educated Youth Center South, he saw that the father and son of the Xia family had already arrived. "Uncle Xia, these 3 houses will trouble you." An Yinan grabbed 3 bundles of rice from the space and put them into a small cloth bag. "We were supposed to arrange for dinner today, but we just arrived at the village and the house couldn't be opened like this. We took this rice back and added some rice soup to drink." Xia quickly pushed it back and said, "An Jiqing, sister.in.Lolly has already reported the situation. I can't take your rice. Mrs. Li, who is the wife of the captain, has the surname Li. Uncle Xia, please accept it. Although Aunt Li mentioned the situation, you didn't ask me much. If you don't accept this rice, I'm not at ease. The Kong and the roof are both major issues. If there is a slight leak, even if the Kong is burning, it won't heat up. Besides, smoking and pouring wind are common occurrences. The roof, not to mention, directly threatens life safety. She would rather spend more and put in more effort to avoid any worries. Perhaps the father and son of the Xia family are not like that, but they cannot take advantage of themselves. They are looking at Aunt Li's face. What about in the future? This person has to deal with, and in the future, no one's face will be good, so we can only get along on our own. Okay, then Uncle has the audacity to accept it." Uncle Xia smiled foolishly, a rare shyness among northeastern men. And arranged everything that needed to be placed in the south, and as soon as the house was cleaned up, the items were gradually delivered. She found an empty room with a Kong, tidied it up a bit, and then spread her luggage in the room. She had to make do with it for 2 days. South. Xia Yuan knocked on the door. An Yinan said, "Have you finished placing it?" Xia Yuan was too lazy to tidy up, so he moved into the big dormitory first and waited for the Kong to dry before tidying up his small dormitory. Even Zhang Qian has this idea. Chapter 9. 1 Support for 2. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Taking into the south and into the north, if it was inconvenient, I would tidy up a room myself. Well, it's settled down, there's not much to settle down. By the way, can you help me keep these things? It's not reassuring to keep them in that room. Xia Yuan pursed his lips, and in the past few days, Sun Shaoqin has only shallow eyelids. Who knows what's wrong with her? An Yinan widened his eyes. You really believe me? 20 big Unity tickets, a bundle of tickets, and even a small bag of white noodles. Can you help me? I have to say, the little girl is really good at acting coquettishly. An Yinan rubbed her eyebrows helplessly, while neither the north nor the north were so coquettish. You write a note, what do you have? The 2 of us will sign, 1 for each person. We will arrange it in your cabin later, and we will pick up the items according to the note. An Yinan sighed, thankfully having space, otherwise it would be really difficult to handle. The human heart is separated by the belly. Not to mention others, a Sun Shaoqin is worth everyone's warning. Okay. Xia Yuan immediately responded, and the 2 of them took a plate and wrote a note. Although Bai Mian didn't know the specific weight, he just estimated it roughly. After Xia Yuan left, An Yinan threw things directly into the corner of the space to prevent mixing with his own things. The sister and brother didn't join the fire at night, just ate some hard xiaobing, baked cake and griddle. Tomorrow I will go to the county town, buy some things that are not available in the village, and send a safety letter to the godmother. It was night, and An Yinan smelled the earthy smell in the room, but instead looked forward to the future. Sister, I've asked the captain before. I can also farm pigsty and go to the fields to pick up grain to earn a share of work. And stared north and looked at his sister. In the future, he will grow up and take care of his sister. No one can beat my sister anymore, no one can do it. Okay, the north is really impressive, An Yinan smiled and narrowed her eyes. Receiving praise from her sister, and Xiangbei quietly blushed. The next morning, An took into the north and went to the captain's house, placing into the north. She has never had contact with anyone from the youth institute now and dare not let Bei stay alone in the institute. After setting up in Xiangbei, he returned to the educated youth center and called on An Yuan and Zhang Qian to take the ox cart together. Watching An carry a large basket half a person high, both of them were shocked. South, are you entering life a bit quickly? An Yuan widened his eyes and looked at the person who was not at odds with the village girls. An Yinan rolled his eyes without any elegance and looked at the two of them in silence. What are you doing in the county town? The two of them scratched their heads, purely because they were looking south of An, so they followed. 1 or 2, both have excellent family conditions. An Yuan secretly signed up to go to the countryside. After being discovered, although she scolded her, her parents couldn't bear to let her suffer. They tried their best to show her good things. And Zhang Qian, he has well hidden his past and conditions, but from aspects such as behavior, dress, etiquette, etc., it can be seen that the conditions are not bad. You are truly a young lady who does not indulge in worldly pleasures. Can I buy a hot kettle or not? An Yinan felt a headache. The two of them were taken aback and said, buy. Autumn is about to rush down to the ground. Shoes, gloves, and it's best to prepare some oil and water. Autumn has been busy for a month, and it's tiring and makes people peel off their skin. Don't ask An Yinan how she knew, she researched a lot of things about this era because of the emergence of space and the story of the girl in her dream. Moreover, there is Aunt Li in the village, and she has also inquired a bit. Oh, I'll buy whatever South buys. The little girl had just arrived a day ago, and her accent was a bit floating. Zhang Qian nodded absent-mindedly. He spoke very little and made very few decisions, more like observing that kind of person. An Yinan would cover up a lot in front of Zhang Qian. The ox cart slowly walked for an hour and a half before finally arriving at the county town. Returning to the village at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, if you take a bus, come here early to gather. Bo didn't raise his eyes, just reminded a few people. Bo, we know now, An Yinan replied. Bo looked up to the south of An and then lowered his head to fill his cigarette bag. An Yinan went to the post office first, wrote a peace letter to the godmother, and then bought some stamps. Not to mention whether they were worth it or not, they all have commemorative value in the future, representing traces of history. After leaving the post office, An Yinan suggested that everyone act separately. She needs to take advantage of this opportunity to take out the resources in the space and have a source for everything. After the three of them separated, and went directly to the waste station, some of whom wanted to pick up leaks, but more of them went to buy old newspapers. At the waste station, an old man sat in the yard, lying on a rocking chair sunbathing. Upon hearing the sound of the door being pushed open, the old man opened his eyes and said, "What do you want to buy?" And looked south at the yard, where things were piled up haphazardly. "I want to buy some old newspapers and some ceramic jars." The old man ordered a pile of paper and said, "Choose the newspaper on this side, and there's also a pile by the door of that house. You can watch and choose. The pottery jars are all over there, just bring them over after you finish selecting." After finishing speaking, he didn't look at me and closed his eyes to bask in the sun. An Yinan first went to the pile of newspapers, picked a large stack of newspapers, and also selected some Enlightenment books. Although there are many books in her space, neither paper or print can be taken out temporarily. I am already 10 years old in Bei. When my parents were here before, I recognized Chinese characters and attended elementary school. After their parents had an accident, the siblings couldn't go to school at all. In the winter of Dongbei, there is plenty of time to study, which happens to enlighten the north. I have carefully selected over 10 books, all of which are children's enlightenment books and reading materials. It was placed next to the grandfather's rocking chair, and then went to the ceramic jars. I picked out many jars and ceramic jars, and even a set of plum, orchid, bamboo, and chrysanthemum dusting bottles. "Grandpa, take these first and see how much they cost." The old man flipped through several books and found no particularly illegal ones, so he used a big scale to weigh them. "This stack of books costs 70 cents. This pile of newspapers costs 60 cents. Counting the jars again, give the jars 2 yuan. 3 yuan 3, I bought a bunch of things, not to mention picking up or not, it's not important. Mainly because these things are practical. Putting food in a jar can prevent mice from gnawing on it, as well as prevent moisture and insects, achieving multiple benefits with one action." "All right." An Yinan handed the money to the old man, then put all the jars in the big basket, and held the pile of newspapers in his arms before leaving the waste station. I found a deserted place and put all kinds of jars into the space, as well as the books selected for Xiangbei. I have to slowly take them out in the future. Only the old newspapers were put in the basket, and flour and rice, as well as mantu and steamed buns were taken. From the clothing side, I finally pulled out a earthy scarf and 2 pairs of gloves. Finally, I picked up 2 hot water kettles and held them in my hand. I slowly walked to the state-owned restaurant, and the 3 of them agreed to gather at the state-owned restaurant. Chapter 10. Safe Warehouse. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. South, here and here. I heard Xiangbei's voice from a distance, and An Yinan waved his hand towards that side. Zhang Qian nodded south of An. "Today, there is braised pork belly in the state-run hotel. It's 60 cents a bowl, and you don't need a ticket. But one person can only buy one. I've lined up a number for you. If you don't want it, I'll give you money." Xiangbei talked about braised pork belly. His eyes were bright and his mouth was swallowing. He looked so happy in the south. She really wanted to buy more braised pork belly and meat buns. Now that autumn is busy, she has reason to eat more. Otherwise, if you don't leave the village and still bring out things, it will also make people suspicious. Yes, braised pork belly in brown sauce can't be dispensed with. "Thank you, Yuan, for helping me line up." An Yinan smiled and handed them a piece of fruit candy. Don't be fooled by Zhang Qian's coldness, even though he is familiar with both of them, he still feels like he is 1,000 miles away from others. But it's such a cold person who loves sweets so much. Don't ask me how I know. Every time I eat candy, any sugar lover can tell the satisfied expression, "Okay. On the 37th, pick up your meal on the 37th. The clerk at the small window shouted loudly. Xiangbei quickly ran over with a wooden plaque and said, "Sister, our number. A bowl of braised pork belly and a bowl of white rice, please take them away." The clerk looked at the list, took back the brand and handed them over. Xiangbei smiled sweetly and quickly ran back with something in hand. "Old fragrance, much more delicious than what my mother makes." Without hesitation, he belittled his mother. An Yinan smiled, "It seems that there is no limit to the quantity of steamed buns and mantu. I will buy some later and go back to the autumn harvest. I will save some oil and water." She has space and is not afraid of things breaking down, but she is not prepared to buy too many. Yesterday, the captain sent them reserve grain, which was approved by the commune. Each person only had a small cloth bag, and it was all coarse grain. They have a better time going to the countryside, and after 2 months of autumn harvest, the public grain will be paid and the village will distribute the grain. If we go to the countryside after distributing grain, we may have to starve for 6 months. I'll buy a few and bring them with me later, Zhang Qian said in agreement. Xiangbei has long been fighting with braised pork belly. After a while, Zhang Qian and braised pork belly from the south of An also came out. To the south of An, he bought 10 more mantu and 10 meat buns, put them in clean cloth bags, and brought them back with braised pork belly. South, why did you buy so much? Xiangyuan widened her eyes and rubbed her bulging belly. Today's braised pork belly is free, but the price is a dime too. For the three of them who are not so poor in money, no one cares about these. It's natural to let go of eating. To the south of An, half of braised pork belly was distributed to the lunchbox, and then white rice was mixed with braised pork belly. Don't tell me, I don't know whether it is because I have been hungry for a long time or the raw materials of this era are good. This braised pork belly is not greasy at all, but it tastes delicious. Me and Bebe, we don't share the fire with the main dormitory. We'll start our own small stove and prepare enough food, An Yinan said slowly after swallowing the food. Zhang Qian and Xia Yuanyuan both understand the situation. They have been sharing a fire with the dormitory these days, and the food they eat depends on the taste of the people cooking that day. After 3 people finished their meal, Zhang Qian and Xia Yuanyuan each bought 5 meat buns and prepared to add food when they were hungry. South, I'll leave my buns with you. Xia Yuanyuan blinked her Kalanzi big eyes, determined. An Yinan nodded and said, okay. At this moment, Zhang Qian also handed over the buns and took out the pot from An Yinan's basket, placing it in his big basket. Has she become their warehouse now? A warehouse with security passwords is still set up. Before being reborn, and passed by a farm tool shop in the south, which contained various farm tools, iron pots, buckets, water kettles, and coal stoves. She prepared 3 or 4 for each one, but who knew she had just gone to the countryside, so she needed them. The 3 of them didn't need anything to buy anymore, so they walked to the place where the ox cart was in the village. Bo was squatting on the ground smoking, and the cigarette pot was red and gray. You 3 have come back early, there's still a while left. If you want to buy anything, you can still go shopping. Bo squatted under the big willow tree without moving. An Yinan took a meat bun, wrapped it in newspaper, and handed it to Nyobo. Uncle Nyo, we've been waiting for half a day now, haven't we had lunch yet? Let's have a steamed bun to cushion our stomach. Nyobo quickly stood up and pushed back. I'm charging you for the ox cart fee. How could I ask for your steamed buns? This thing is expensive, please take it back and give it to your brother to eat. Nyobo's face also had a hint of smile, and the expression of the farmer man was rarely hidden. I brought baozi for Bebe, this is specifically for you. Please accept it. An Yinan stuffed the bun into Nyobo's hand, and before Nyobo could refuse, he turned around and returned to Xia Yuanyuan's side. She originally wanted to buy a bicycle, but the location in Quanshui village was also inconvenient for bicycles. The downhill road was easy to walk, but the uphill road could only be pushed. How did you buy so many newspapers? Xia Yuanyuan was surprised to find that An had installed an old newspaper with a small half-frame south of it. Pasting the wall, otherwise the earth wall is prone to soil falling off. Pasting the newspaper in advance. An Yinan looked at the young lady in silence, these 2 really don't know anything. Zhang doesn't know anything. Qian said he learned again. But looking at the expression on An Yinan's face, how do you feel that he has been looked down upon again? Why is there such a big difference between urban and rural people? Should I also buy some? Xia Yuanyuan immediately realized, and next time he decided to closely follow south and never separate. He had just separated for half a day and bought less things. If An Yinan knew about Xia Yuanyuan's psychology at this moment, he would definitely regret it. From then on, An Yinan had an additional small assistant, who was the kind that couldn't be left behind. An Yinan rubbed his painful forehead and said, I'll buy it for you. Please treat me to dinner later. Xia Yuanyuan almost lifted An Yinan up. The little girl's personality is very pleasing, but most of the time she is making mistakes. If we say the child is stupid, it's not stupid either. After all, her attitude towards Sun Shaoqin is evident. Is this the innate 6th sense? Speak of the devil. What did the three of you buy? These baskets one by one. Sun Xiaoqin twisted her waist and walked over from a distance. Xian Zhao did not come out, his conditions were not good, and he was not someone who took advantage of others. As she spoke, Sun Xiaoqin was about to lift the cover off An Yinan's basket, and An Yinan raised her hand and slapped it mercilessly. With a loud pop, Sun Xiaoqin felt a sharp pain. Ah! How could you hit someone? Sun Xiaoqin rubbed her hand, the back of which was red and swollen. An Yinan sneered, this person is really not obedient. Whoever moves my things, I'll chop their hands. You can give it a try. That smile fell into Sun Xiaoqin's eyes, reminding her of yesterday's suffocation. She quickly avoided the three of them and went to the other side of the cart.